What's the creepiest unexplained thing you've ever encountered? Story 1. From when I was 5 until I was about 7, I used to see faces outside my second floor bedroom window all the time. We were living in a tiny farmhouse in a heavily wooded, secluded area, and obviously nobody was out there. But every night I would see them. Some were just normal faces, others had odd expressions, and others appeared distorted and unsettling. I still distinctly remember seeing those faces, but up until recently, I had assumed it was a false memory in an overactive imagination. About 7 years ago, we moved out of that house, and a family friend, Jake, purchased it. Jake had a daughter, Lily, who was at the time this took place 5 years old. About 2 years ago, I went over there for a visit, and Jake asked my boyfriend for some advice since he was studying to be a doctor. He said that every night Lily claimed she saw faces in her window, and she would not go to sleep and asked if there was anything he could recommend. It turned out Lily's room was my old room, and she was the same age I was when I started seeing them. I was stunned. I am a science-focused person, and I do not believe in this kind of thing, but for the life of me, I cannot explain my way out of this one. Story 2, I am not sure if this counts, but it happened last week, and it really unsettled me. I was friends with a girl when I was a teenager. Not best friends, but we went to the same school, and I would go over and spend time at her house after school sometimes. She was extremely quiet in school and had no friends, so her mother would often ask my mother to send me over so she would have someone to spend time with. I did not mind because she was quite funny and talked more when it was just the two of us. Anyway, we fell out of touch a long time ago, and I have not spoken to or seen her in years, like 15 years, I would say. Last week, I was at my desk at work, and she suddenly came into my mind for some reason. I was just working, and I thought of her. Specifically, my thought was, is she alive or not? I do not know why that thought came to me, so I made a mental note to ask my mother next time we spoke. Then 2 days later, I received an email from my mother saying a bit of sad news that she had passed away on Monday. It really unnerved me. My logical mind tells me it is just a strange coincidence, but it shook me because I had not thought of her in so long, and it was the day she passed that she came into my mind. Story 3. I was on a road trip with my girlfriend and her friend at the time. It was in the middle of the day, so the psychological effects that the night has were not in play, and we decided to stop for a bathroom break. Being in the middle of Appalachia, we saw a small rest stop and got off the interstate, as we might not get another chance for a while. The stop was pretty basic. Essentially, it was just a bathhouse with a small parking lot attached. It was fairly open, so we could see everything around it with not many trees or other foliage. There was one other car parked on the far side of the building. I was about to open the door when I got a very strong feeling that I should not go in that building. I had no idea why I felt this way since the building was not inherently unsettling. Deciding to listen to my instinct, I opened my mouth to suggest we go somewhere else when my girlfriend's friend said that she had a very bad feeling about that place and asked if we could go somewhere else. Nothing was said between getting there and her speaking up. Chills went down my spine and we left immediately. To this day, I still cannot explain what happened other than we both got the same strong foreboding feeling from a random bathroom in the middle of nowhere. Story 4. Back when I was in high school, my best friend and I were browsing around a very small jewel shop out in what could be considered a rural village near my family's summer cottage. There was a single man who owned and ran the shop, and he was sitting behind the counter at the front of the store. We were the only customers in the store, and as I was walking around, a feeling of dread came over me. Just like yourself, I had a strong instinct that I was not safe in the shop and that I needed to leave immediately. I did not want to make it obvious to the man that I was feeling uncomfortable and wanted to leave, so I casually told my friend that I could not afford anything and wanted to leave now. She agreed. As soon as we were out the door, my friend told me that she was glad I suggested leaving because she also had a horrible feeling while browsing and wanted to leave immediately. Much like me, she did not want to make any obvious scene in front of the man, so she said nothing. Whenever I think back on that moment, it gives me chills thinking about why we both had such a strong instinct that we were not safe in that store. I am glad we followed our instincts and left as soon as we did. If the man had been dangerous, it would have been an easy situation for someone with bad intentions. It was a quiet town, and my parents had no idea what we were doing at that time of day. Story 5. They filmed parts of The Exorcist at the college I attended. There are all sorts of spooky urban legend type stories told about the supposed cursed filming of that movie. I enjoy ghost stories and urban legends, but our Exorcist campus stories did not affect me much. The idea that the filming of a Hollywood movie would bring paranormal activity to haunt students in their dorms did not seem particularly unsettling. It was certainly less so than other campus legends we had, like the dorm that used to be an old morgue, or the secret tunnels that ran under campus that were used to transport bodies to that morgue. I like those ones, but the Exorcist stories felt exaggerated. Several weeks after classes had ended my junior year, I was scheduled to leave on one of those overseas volunteer trips that college students do. Our group was scheduled to leave from campus and head to the airport together early one June morning. We decided it would be fun to all spend the night before on campus together. All the dorms had been emptied out for the summer, except one or two kept open for summer students. One of the people coming on our trip, however, was a school employee who lived on campus in a comfortable air-conditioned apartment in one of the closed-up dorms. As you are probably guessing, it was a dorm in which they had filmed an exorcist scene, supposedly in the basement. Out of the whole group, there were only two guys, me and my friend Brian. The girls all decided to have a big sleepover on the floor in the staff member's fourth-floor apartment. Brian and I decided to go find an empty room with beds but no air conditioning to stay in down the hall, partly because we both wanted a bed, partly because hours of late-night conversation did not interest us, and partly because we knew about the haunted reputation of the building and thought it would be fun. There was a lot going through my mind that night. I was excited about the trip since I had never been overseas before. I really wanted to get a good night of sleep so I could start the trip feeling rested. The room Brian and I chose was incredibly hot and stuffy, even with the windows opened as much as they would go, and my mind was racing the whole night thinking about the long flight in the morning. The hours passed slowly. At some point after lying awake for hours, I started feeling like I needed to use the bathroom. The only open bathroom in the building was down on the first floor. I knew that getting up and going would make me feel even more awake, so I tried to ignore it. Also, even though I did not take the Exorcist legend seriously, the idea of going down to the first floor in the dark did not appeal to me. Eventually, though, the need was too strong. I got up and, using my cell phone as a light, found my way to the elevator, went down to the first floor, used the bathroom, and started back up. I got into the elevator and pressed the button for the fourth floor, but instead the elevator went down, taking me to the basement. Knowing that nobody else was staying in the building besides us, my heart started pounding. I had been in a tired daze, and suddenly I was wide awake wondering what was happening. When the doors to the basement opened, I closed my eyes. I did not want to look out. I felt my way to the panel and peeked out just enough to find the button for the fourth floor. I pressed it. The doors started to close, but then jolted as if something had stopped them. I was standing there in the elevator, in complete silence, breaking into a cold sweat despite the heat, and I kept pressing the button for the fourth floor, and the door kept trying to shut but could not. Eventually, I opened my eyes to make sure nothing was actually stuck between the doors, and all I saw was the pitch dark of the basement beyond. I started thinking I might have to go out into that darkness and take the stairs if I wanted to get back. That was when I heard it, and I swear this truly happened. I heard a person quietly muttering something off in the darkness. I closed my eyes again and kept pressing the button, and eventually the doors managed to close, and the elevator took me back up to the fourth floor. I never got back to sleep that night, and I started the trip feeling exhausted and unsettled. Story 6. Two of my best friends, who were also a couple, passed away last summer in an unexpected drowning accident. We were living together at the time of their deaths. In the weeks after they had passed, I would frequently wake up to noises in their bedrooms or hear knocking on my bedroom door. One night, while the search and recovery was still ongoing for one of their bodies, I heard my friend call my name in distress. My ears were ringing from it, and he was finally found the next day in what was meant to be the last day of the search for him. I moved out of that house 2 months later and to a new city for a job. Every time I visit one of my friends' families, I always use my friend's ensuite and take some time to sit in her room a few times. I have heard knocking on the ensuite door. It is a glass frosted door, and there is never anyone else in her room. It is a comforting feeling that makes me smile. Since I have moved to the new city, I have had two standout things happen. The first time, I was under the covers playing a game on my phone, laying on my right side. I felt someone sit down on the bed behind me, and then the covers were pulled off of me with quite a force. I instinctively thought it was my boyfriend, so I asked what he was doing and pulled them back over my head again, and then suddenly froze. My boyfriend was at the gym, and I was the only one home. It took me at least 5 minutes to come out from under the covers and look. There was no one there. A few weeks after that, my boyfriend and I got into bed one night after visiting friends. My boyfriend then sat up quickly and was unsettled, and he said that while his hand was laying still under the covers, he felt a ring slide onto his pinky finger. It was my missing Claddagh ring that I had lost a few months earlier. I immediately started crying. One of my friends who passed had worn a Claddagh ring also, and I had told him how to wear it properly when he and my other friend got together with the heart facing inwards, when your heart is taken. He was one of the only other people who wore that ring, and we both loved what the rings represented. I was devastated when I lost it. We have no idea how it appeared under the covers, but I am grateful to have it back again. Story 7. A couple of years ago, my significant other and I were staying the night at his friend's house since we had a bit to drink. I was sleeping on the couch and I woke up because someone was moving around in the room. There was an older woman, maybe in her 60s, walking towards the hallway. I started to adjust and she looked at me and I asked what she was doing. She apologized for waking me and said that she was going to check on Skylar, who was their 2-year-old. I assumed she was the child's mother because she would stay in their guest room fairly often. I went back to sleep and woke up again a little later. I could hear Skylar talking and laughing. I went back to sleep again. When I woke up the third time, it was because Skylar was crying and I could hear an electronic toy going off in his room. The woman came back down the hall and said that she had stepped on a doll and it woke him up. I told her it was fine, and I heard Skylar's mother go to his room to put him back to sleep. When we were all up the next morning for breakfast, I asked about her mother, and they looked at me confused. I said that a woman woke me up several times during the night, and I assumed it was her mother staying in the guest room. She said that her mother was not there and asked if I talked to the woman. I said that she apologized for waking me and Skylar and that she had stepped on a doll that made noise. Her husband stared at her and said that he had told her there was a presence in the house. Apparently, he had experienced things regularly, like drinks being knocked over. It turned out he was abusive, and they separated not long after this. Story 8. When I was about 8 years old, I fell asleep and had what I can only describe as a 1990s toy commercial on a surreal and strange trip. It was a close-up of a snarling Doberman that was covered in neon colors, and in a second it had bitten me on my arm. I jerked awake, and my arm was in extreme pain. I looked at my arm and I was bleeding, and there appeared to be a bite mark on my arm that could only have happened if I was holding my arm in a defensive position. The bite mark had elongated canine shapes and was bleeding. We never had and never would have a dog. My father also told me a story that always unsettled him. Shortly after I had just started to walk, my father woke up one morning and came to get me out of my crib. When he arrived, I was nowhere to be seen. He went downstairs to see if somehow I was there. I was not. He looked around until he finally noticed the front door and screen door were both unlocked and wide open, deadbolts and all. He feared the worst, so he ran outside and found me in the bed of his Ford F-250 truck crying. Story 9. I grew up in a small town and lived out in the country. My mom and I were coming home from Walmart really late one night and decided to take the back way home. I still had my learner's permit, so I wanted to take a road with less traffic. Anyone who has ever lived or been to the country knows how creepy these roads can be at night. I was going around a curve right before a one-lane bridge, so I slowed down in case I had to stop. Out of nowhere, this woman jumped in front of my car on the driver's side and started pounding on the hood. Her mouth was moving, but I could not make out what she was saying. My mom started panicking and told me not to stop and just keep driving. I kept going, and we both looked back to see where she was, and there was no one there. To this day, my mom and I still remember it clearly. It turns out there is a legend about a woman who died around the bridge and supposedly can be seen sometimes late at night. I still get goosebumps to this day just thinking about it. Story 10. This was years ago when I was much younger, in my 20s. I lived right by a forest that had many hiking trails through it, and I loved to take my dog for a walk there at night to look at the stars, listen to the river relax, and enjoy the quiet. You could expect other people there since it was a park, but usually it was pretty empty. For reference, I was about 100 pounds and my dog was a 10-pound miniature pinscher, so neither of us were a threat. I also did not have my cell phone on me because I was careless. It was about 11 at night on a warm Tuesday, and we were resting in one of the little alcoves by the riverbank where I like to sit and enjoy the fireflies. Then suddenly I heard a horrible scream. My dog started barking like crazy and I panicked, but then I thought it was probably a rabbit because they can sound strangely human. My dog calmed down and I went back to looking at the sky, and then the scream happened again but louder and then twice more. My dog was growling and trying to hide behind me, and then I heard a noise like something huge was running through the forest with loud stomps and branches breaking. I thought a girl was being chased and I felt awful because I did not have my phone. It got closer and my dog and I hunkered down hoping we could not be seen from the path, and I saw one of the trees above us shake. It felt like that scene from the movie with the hobbits hiding under the tree roots. The stomping went right past me, but I did not see anything on the path. I stayed there for a while, did not hear anything else, and eventually went home. There were broken branches on the path, and it smelled like wood smoke, but nothing else. If my dog had not been there visibly terrified, I would have assumed it was a dream. She also refused to go down that specific path ever again. Story 11. A few years ago, a friend of mine was killed by a drunk driver. He was only 19 years old and was driving out to a party his sister was at to make sure she and her friends got back home safely since they live far away. He ended up getting hit head-on by another 19-year-old who had left a party extremely intoxicated. He was taken way too soon. He was full of life and loved by everyone. It was hard to accept that he was gone. The night after his death, I had an extremely vivid dream. I was in his car in the passenger seat talking with him casually, and we were both fully aware he had passed away. I remember him looking serious while driving, and I asked him questions. I felt sad seeing him like that, since he had always been cheerful. I asked things like what it was like to die or if it hurt, and he answered bluntly. I remember feeling sad knowing he was gone, but also calm because I got to talk to him and somehow know he was still out there. The strangest part was waking up. I have never had this happen before, but right after waking from the dream, I could not breathe. My throat felt extremely dry, and I was struggling to get air. I woke up my significant other in a panic, trying to understand why I could not breathe. Eventually, I calmed down and caught my breath. Then I remembered the dream. Maybe it was coincidence, but it was the strangest thing to ever happen to me. I would not call the memory creepy, more calming. Coincidence or not, I like to think I had the chance to talk to my friend that night and know he is still somewhere. I also wanted to share this story because he would have been 24 today. Happy birthday, big man, we all remember and love you every day. And we will be thinking about you tonight when we are all together celebrating. Story 12. One evening, my family and I were cleaning the basement, and we came across two passport-sized pictures of my dad's parents. My grandpa had already passed away years ago, but my grandma was still alive but in a different country. My dad wanted to get these photos scanned and enlarged, so we placed them on the table in our living room and continued cleaning. The next morning, my grandma's picture was missing, but my grandpa's picture was in the same spot. We looked for this photo everywhere and could not find it. This was in autumn, so the heating system was not on, the cooling system was not on. No windows were open, and nobody had opened the front door, so there was no source of wind. We gave up looking for it. A couple of nights later, I was lying in bed, and I do not know what came over me, but I got up and went to the wall closest to the table in the living room and looked carefully at the trim. We had looked around this area before too, but never found anything. It happened that beside the spot I knelt down to, there was the tiniest crack between the trim and the wall, and I could see a tiny white triangle sticking out of it. I used my nail to slowly pull the triangle up and realized it was the corner of my grandma's photo. I placed it back on the table and went to sleep. The next morning when I woke up, we got a call saying that my grandma had passed away overnight. I feel that my grandma was trying to send a message before she died. There was this other incident relating to her passing that unsettled me for days, but this post is getting too long, so I will stop here. In addition, at that time, my grandma was living with my aunt. My cousin was her favorite grandson. He always lived with her, so they got along well. If I remember correctly, my cousin happened to be in school at that time in a different country. He came home for break, which lasted about a week, and then went back to school. The moment he got off the plane in the country where his school was, he received a call saying my grandma had passed. It was almost as if she waited for him to come home, spend time, and leave before she died. For some reason, before he left, he decided to take family pictures with her. My grandma had Parkinson's, so her hands shook a bit, but if she held them down, it was not too obvious. The reason I mention this is because a couple of days after she passed, my cousin sent us the pictures he took before he left the morning of the day she died. In the picture, she was sitting in the middle while the family was around her. My grandma was extremely pale, so in a picture with my cousin's family who have darker skin, she would have already stood out. But for some reason, everyone in the picture was crystal clear. Yet there was this blur across my grandma. I do not want to sound strange saying this, but it looked like those cartoons where someone's spirit seems to be drifting away. If it only happened in one picture, I could explain it. But there were 6 or 7 pictures he took, and in each one, there was this sort of light around her, while everyone else and everything in the background remained clear. I saw those pictures once and decided I never wanted to look at them again. Thinking about it even now makes my palms sweaty. Story 13. I do not think there is anything necessarily creepy about this, but it is definitely unexplainable. I was spending time with a few friends at my apartment complex around 2 in the morning when we decided to walk across the complex to the gas station on the corner. I had not let my dog out for a while, so I grabbed her, put her on a leash, and left with 2 of my friends to start walking to the gas station. Friend 1 was to the right and slightly ahead of me, and friend 2 was walking slowly because he was texting, so he was behind and to the left of me. Friend 1 asked if I wanted him to hold the leash and walk the dog so I could have my hands free to look up a video we were talking about. I handed him the handle to the leash, and my dog was in front of us to the left, about to relieve herself. Friend 1 stopped walking to wait for friend 2, while I continued walking and looking at my phone for the video I was pulling up. Knowing that my dog had stopped and that friend 1 had also stopped, and that the leash was directly in front of me going from friend 1's hand to my dog on my left, I leaned forward trying to catch the leash with the middle of my body to pull my friend and my dog unexpectedly and maybe have a laugh, except I never felt the leash push against me. I turned around and friend 1 and friend 2 were both staring at the leash, which was now behind me. And all 3 of us looked at each other, knowing we had just seen the leash pass right through my body in a way we could not explain. We all panicked at the same time, and it was not one of us convincing the others, it was genuinely witnessed by all of us. We replayed it over and over from our 3 perspectives, and each of us concluded that there was no explanation other than the leash passing through me. It is the strangest thing that has ever happened to me, and to this day, both of them swear it truly happened. Story 14. A couple of years back, a friend and I were visiting Myrtle Beach and stayed at a cheap motel to save money. After a long night, we made it back to our room and quickly fell asleep, or at least she did. I woke up around 3 in the morning to the sound of the phone ringing, so I picked it up in a tired and not quite sober haze. There was only crackling static and heavy breathing on the other end, so I hung up and went back to sleep. Not even 5 minutes later, it rang again, and I answered again to the same static and breathing. The 3rd, 4th, and 5th time, I just let it ring. My friend is a heavy sleeper, so she did not wake up. The 6th time I picked up and yelled into the phone. The 7th time I yelled again. I decided to ignore it the next however many times until I thought it would drive me crazy. I tried to wake my friend up, but it did not work. Finally, I decided to go down to the front desk to see if they knew what was going on and how to stop it. Since I disliked elevators, I went to the stairs and found that they were completely unlit and pitch black. I took the elevator down since I did not want to risk falling in a dark stairwell, and to my horror, the elevator stalled and flickered for about 5 seconds between the 2nd and 3rd floor. Still unsettled and feeling like I was in a horror movie, I made it to the front desk and found a pale, one-eyed man lightly snoring at his desk. I woke him up and told him what was happening, so he checked the switchboard and said he did not see any record of calls going to our room, but he would block all calls anyway. I questioned him about the elevator and the dark stairs. He laughed off the elevator issue, saying it was old but reliable. He got serious about the stairs, though, saying I would want to avoid them anyway. Still unnerved, I went back up to the room, saw that there were 3 missed calls while I was gone, and sat on the bed waiting for the phone to ring again. After about 20 minutes, I got back into bed and went to sleep. The next morning, I told my friend about the previous night and said I could not count on her when things got unsettling. She thought I dreamed it all until I showed her the incoming call record. After that, we watched some Cartoon Network and took turns showering. When I got out of the shower, she was looking at the phone and the instruction card trying to figure out why the light in the corner was flashing. After realizing it was a voicemail and how to hear it, she listened to about 5 seconds of static. She put it on speaker to replay it, and what we heard made us run out of there. At the end of the recorded static, a deep male voice whispered that he just needed to hear my voice again. To this day, I do not know what that was about. That night felt extremely surreal. Story 15. When I was born, we lived in an apartment. It was not big, but apparently there was one little hallway that absolutely terrified me starting when I was about 15 months old. I would just stand still, frozen in place, wide-eyed, refusing to go past it. When they asked me what I was scared of, all I would say was that it was the luck. Not long after we moved to a house a few blocks away, where we lived until I moved out on my own. No sooner had we moved in than I became terrified of the back end of one particular hallway, acting exactly like I had in the apartment, and insisting that it was the luck. Apparently, I seemed most scared of the corner up by the ceiling, but I would avoid the whole hall at all costs. As I got older, I stopped being afraid. And while I could remember how scared I had been, I realized one day that I could not remember what I thought the luck was. 30 years later, I was living in a different state in the house my husband and I bought when we found out I was pregnant with our daughter, who was born when I was almost exactly the same age as my mom when she had me. She started to have nightmares not long after turning 1, but one night when she was about 16 months old, she woke up screaming like I had never heard before. I ran up there and she had just woken up from a terrible dream, but she was inconsolable long after I picked her up. I started walking her around the house, trying to soothe her, but eventually I had to use the bathroom, so I took her into our bathroom and turned on the light. As soon as we walked in, she stopped crying and calmed down. I had never seen her react like that, so I asked her what she had been so scared of, and she looked right at me and replied without hesitation, Uck. Story 16. I was on one of my smoke breaks back when I used to smoke, and I was out front of where I worked. It was broad daylight, around 3 to 4 in the afternoon, overcast, but clear as anything could be. No more than 40 to 50 meters from where I was, there was a clinic, and in the parking lot, I saw a lady get out of a silver SUV. She was wearing an orange jacket, a jean skirt, and almost knee-high black leather boots. She had dark red hair with black undertones. I am being descriptive just to convey how clearly I could see what I was about to see. The lady took about 6 to 7 steps in the opposite direction of the vehicle, then stopped, raised her arms and head in the air, as though she had forgotten something. She then took 2 steps toward the vehicle and stopped, put both hands out in front of her, pointing toward the vehicle, and made the motion of closing the door, even though there was without a doubt 4 feet of distance between her and the vehicle. The door closed following the exact motions her arms and hands were making, as though she was using some kind of unseen force. I know what I saw, and it happened exactly as I saw it, but all I could come up with was magnetic doors or automatic doors, but the vehicle was still running, and I could see exhaust coming from the tailpipe. Story 17. I work overnight security at a condo. One night I noticed someone had spilled something in the basement hallway. I had just come back from patrolling there, so I knew it had happened in the last few minutes. So I went on the cameras to see who did it, because why not? This was at about 1 in the morning, so very low traffic. The camera has sight of the hallway and the doorway to the stairs that lead up to the ground floor. This stairway is small, compact, and only about 20 steps. It has a door in the basement and a door on the second floor with no other way to enter. There are cameras watching both doors. The spill was close to the camera near the door, so I watched that one. I saw myself coming down the hallway and going into the doorway to the stairs. When that door was closing and I saw myself going up the steps in the last second, I saw something in there with me. I definitely did not see anyone or anything when I was physically there, but on the HD camera, clear as day, something was there. So I watched the cameras going in and out all night and never saw it again. The next day I rewatched the tape thinking maybe I imagined it, but no, it was still there. I told my coworker to look at it and he saw it too. The cleaning lady saw it as well. It did not look human. Bigger than a dog but completely black. You only get 1 second of footage, and you cannot make out details, but it is there on camera. Also, there is no way I would have missed it in person. It was large and right there. I have no explanation other than maybe a camera glitch, and maybe someone who did not hear the story would think it looked like nothing. I do not go in that staircase anymore. It is just not worth it. The other guard avoids it too from what he tells me. Story 18. This did not happen to me, but to my dad. When I was young, I had a sleepwalking habit. I do not think it lasted long because I always remember hearing about it in the past tense, but I guess it was frequent. It was also common for my dad, my brother, and me to fall asleep in different chairs while watching a movie in the living room. One night, my dad says he woke up and in the light of the looping DVD menu of whatever we had fallen asleep watching, he saw me standing in the hallway by the front door, facing the wall where we hung many family pictures. He quietly told me to go to bed, but I was not moving at all, so he tried a little louder, but I still was not responding. After a couple of attempts, he figured he would have to take me to bed, so he got up from the couch and stepped on me lying next to him. He looked up and saw me turn and look at him before vanishing. The way he describes me disappearing is what unsettles me. He says it was not like I was there and then gone, but like he lost a second of time, and in that second I vanished as if he had to double take, even though he had not looked away. I am not spiritual or religious, so I rationalize it as a trick of the light from being tired, but it is strange hearing him talk about it because he truly believes what he saw. And my mom's brother died a month before I was born, and she has always said I reminded her of him. Where I was seen standing and staring would have been right where his picture was hanging. Story 19. Last year I was renovating my home. It was 7 in the evening when the workers left. My dad gave me the responsibility to close the door of the house before returning to our other home. I turned off the light of the room in the corner of the second story. I started walking downstairs when I heard the sound of paint boxes falling. I got scared, but since our neighbors have a cat that had wandered into our house earlier, I thought the cat might have been in the room and made a mess. I returned to the room and found nothing. No paint boxes had fallen and everything was in place. I turned off the lights again, closed the door and started walking toward the stairs, and suddenly the lights turned on by themselves. I did not know how that happened, but I got scared. I had to return to this house in 2 days, and I was alone at the time, so I panicked. I opened the door, turned on the light, and ran toward the stairs, and the lights turned on again. Then I ran from there. It was the creepiest and most unexplainable thing that has ever happened to me. Story 20. My best friend passed away in July of 2011 from a rare and aggressive form of bone cancer, just a few days after he turned 22. It was an incredibly difficult time in my life, and I struggled to cope in the months that followed. The loss was still fresh that October when I was driving back to my sister's house with my girlfriend from a late-night bonfire, and I received a text message. The text was from a hidden sender address. I opened the picture and immediately set my phone down, choosing to wait until I reached my sister's driveway before trying to understand what I was looking at. It was a picture I had taken of a terrible drawing he had made on his bedroom wall of a chicken nugget doing pull-ups. He was using marijuana after his diagnosis, and I had watched him draw this silly thing one day while we were hanging out. We had laughed for a long time about it, and it was a memory only he and I shared, and now here it was, being sent to me in a mystery message. After taking a moment to process what I was seeing, I burst into tears and tried to call the number back to see if someone was playing a joke on me, but I got an automated message saying the number could not be completed as dialed. Maybe there is a rational explanation, but he always told me he would haunt me after he learned the cancer was terminal. If he has reached out to me other times, it has been more subtle and unnoticed. Love and miss you, Zach. Story 21. I lived in a small house in the country several years ago. It was nothing special and very old, and I am pretty sure it still had cloth wiring. The bathroom had even been an addition. I bought a recliner off Craigslist, as many young men do. My neighbor, whom I had never met, came over just after I bought the chair and set it up in my living room. He invited me to a cookout the next day. I told him to take a seat and grabbed him a beer. He was a super nice guy, older and possibly retired. He offered to mow my grass because he had a new riding mower. We talked for a while and he went home. Fast forward to 4 in the morning, and I got a knock on the door. It was the police. My neighbor had gone missing, and I was the last one to see him. I told them about his visit and they left. I went back to sleep. Around 7 in the morning, my coworker showed up at my house. He sat in my new chair, which I had not yet sat in myself, and talked with me. He left for work and I finished getting ready. Minutes later, there was another knock on the door. It was the police again. They had found my neighbor. He had gone into the woods behind his house to have a small campfire and drink some beers, and was found deceased by his daughter. I got asked many questions about him using substances, but we later found out it was a heart attack. While I was talking to the officer, my phone was blowing up. It was my boss saying they had not seen my coworker, and they knew we usually carpooled. I told them we had not that morning because I was running late. The officer left and I headed into work. On my way in, I was pulled over. My coworker had been found deceased. Heart attack while driving. He was 23 and healthy and getting married later that year. It was horribly tragic. I burned the chair before anyone else could sit in it. Story 22. Not unexplained, but very unsettling. When I was fresh out of high school, I took a bunch of mushrooms with some friends. The house we were at was in an apartment complex that had a locked door to get inside. As the night went on, everyone went to bed, and I was still awake. I went out for a smoke and locked myself out. I spent 10 minutes trying to get back in when I realized it was not going to happen. So I walked down to the corner, and there were 2 police cars parked just sitting there. Being a teenager on mushrooms, I nearly panicked. I ran and hid back in this alcove for what felt like 2 hours, but was probably 15 minutes. I could see the bike path our city had that circled around from where I was. My parents lived not far off it. It was around 5 in the morning, so I just said forget it and decided to walk home. It was probably only 2 miles and I had walked and skateboarded it many times. Whatever, it felt better than being stuck outside. The mushrooms were still going strong, so I walked home without incident and got there as the sun came up. My stepmother was leaving for work as I arrived, and I told her I got locked out and then went to bed. The next day she asked me where I had walked from, because 2 local nuns had been attacked by someone who escaped the local jail. This happened about 800 yards from where I had started walking in the opposite direction. Story 23. Still unexplained. I even told this story to biology and insect-focused forums. No good answer, but there was one funny response I will share at the end. The reason this incident unsettled me is the association of flies with paranormal activity. What happened to me that day I have never experienced again, nor have I heard of anyone else experiencing. It was 1989. I had just purchased my first handgun. I grew up in a family of hunters, but had never owned my own gun. I bought a Colt 45 model 1911. I still have it today. I got some ammunition and drove my 1982 Datsun pickup out to the desert to test it. I was alone, and it was a hot summer morning. I found a deserted area, although there was a lot of trash, meaning people had been shooting there before. I got out excited to try the gun. Then I smelled a very heavy, strong, sweet smell of decay. The smell of something dead and rotting like a dog or some other animal. It was very strong. I moved away from my truck, maybe 100 yards, but the smell was everywhere. It was overwhelming. I fired a couple of magazines and could not stand the smell anymore, so I headed back to the truck. I find that smell frightening. To my horror, I found that the front left quarter of my truck was covered with flies. Completely covered. Like those photos where bees carpet someone or something. There was not a square inch uncovered. The front left fender, the hood, the windshield, the left passenger window, all covered in flies. Even the antenna was covered all the way to the top. Flies were swarming my truck, and the mass was growing fast. Freaked out, I jumped in the truck and took off. My windshield wipers could not remove them. They were coming in the vents and now inside the truck. Once on the freeway, I got my little Datsun up to 90 miles per hour, and they finally started blowing off. When I got into town, I went straight to the car wash. On one of the biology forums, someone joked that my truck must have been a real piece of junk. All jokes aside, it still unsettles me to think about it. Story 24. When I was in high school, we lived on Fort Meade in Maryland. I worked as a bagger at the commissary, and when I got off work one night, my mom was in front of the store in the van. I went over to see her, and she told me she was going to our church to decorate her classroom and asked if I wanted to go. The other option was to go home where my stepdad was, and by that point in my life, he and I did not get along, so I chose to go with my mom. She taught the nursery class at church, which is where people dropped off their babies and toddlers so they could attend services without disruption. The church was in a town called Bowie in Maryland, about a 30-minute drive away. We got to the church and I grabbed the box of decorations and we headed to the front door. It was around 8 in the evening and it was dark and slightly misty outside, creating the perfect atmosphere for a creepy night. To make it worse, we were going to be alone in this church, which I always found a bit eerie. My mother unlocked the door and I walked in with the box. She locked the door behind me and I turned on the lights. The layout was simple. You walk into the foyer and doors in front lead to the auditorium, and there is a hallway to the left. We took that hallway and her classroom was the first door on the left. We walked into the room and I set the box down and started unpacking decorations. We had been inside less than 5 minutes when it happened. From the deepest part of the church, as far as I could tell, came a woman's scream, shrill and loud, cutting through the darkness and silence. My mother and I froze on the spot, neither daring to breathe. I do not know how long we stood there. It felt like hours, but was probably just seconds. This was the only time in my life I felt my blood literally run to my feet and turn cold. My mother finally whispered that we needed to be quiet. Her logic was that if there was someone dangerous in the building, we did not want them to know we were there. I grabbed a metal folding chair and hid behind the door. She asked what I was doing, and I explained that if someone came through the door, I was going to use the chair to defend us. She agreed and looked around for something to use, and settled on a rubber baby doll, which made me quietly laugh because the idea of her confronting someone with a toy was absurd. We stood there with our makeshift weapons when suddenly my mother abandoned the quiet plan and started shouting something about us being protected by the light of Jesus Christ, or something similar. This was almost as frightening as the scream. We returned to being quiet and listened. Nothing. There was a window in the room, so we decided to go out through it and run to the van. We got to the van and sped off, both breathing heavily and terrified. We did not speak for about 10 minutes until my mom finally said that I was not to tell anyone about what happened, especially not anyone at church. I agreed, mostly because I was so scared, and for a long time that was the last we ever discussed it. Story 25. My friend Craig had an older brother, Brandon. One day Brandon called Craig from downtown, and the guy was completely disoriented. Craig thought he was either drunk or high because he could not seem to figure out where he was, despite being downtown where there was plenty of public transport and he lived right on the subway line. He was at most 30 minutes from his house, so Craig spent 2 hours navigating him home over the phone. Brandon got on and off buses and got on trains going the wrong way. Eventually, Brandon said he could see their house in the distance, and his voice started getting static, like he was breaking up. But he kept talking while this happened, and he was completely emotional and happy. He kept saying how grateful he was that Craig stayed with him and showed him how to get home, and how he would have to pay him back someday for helping him. It got to the point where it was all static and sounded like a bad television channel. Then the phone call cut out and there was a knock at the door. Craig opened it. A police officer was standing there holding his hat, and he informed Craig that Brandon was deceased. Out of all the unsettling stories I have heard, this one makes me the most uncomfortable. Being completely honest, I am not sure if Craig imagined the phone call, but I attended Brandon's funeral, so either they were extremely committed to a joke, or this was genuinely unexplainable. Story 26. When I was about 7, my friend's dad was driving me home from my friend's house one night. We were driving down this unlit wooded back road when suddenly he slammed on the brakes. I looked and saw a creature lying in the middle of the road. It looked like what I can only describe as a baby pig, but as large as a small dog. Completely hairless with a skinny tail. It seemed injured or dying. It was on its back, pawing at the air. My friend's dad was fascinated, and I was terrified. It was in the middle of the narrow road, so we could not go around it without running it over. For some reason, my friend's dad honked at it. I have no idea what he expected, but we definitely did not expect what happened. The thing stopped pawing, rolled onto its side, and got up on its hind legs and walked like a human toddler into the woods. I was terrified. My friend's dad drove forward, slowly, speechless. But before we were a mile down the road, he turned around and went back. I begged him not to, but he would not listen, and sure enough, the creature was back in the middle of the road again. My friend's dad honked again, and this time the thing jolted up as if startled and ran into the woods on all fours. We did not see it again, and my friend did not believe us when we told him. It was definitely the strangest thing I have ever seen. Story 27. It was summer session at the beginning of my junior year in college. My best friend and roommate and I rented a two-bedroom apartment just off campus. She and I rarely saw each other during the daytime because our class schedules did not match. I had an 8 in the morning class, and her earliest began at 11. Several mornings I came home around 11:30 after early classes to find one kitchen chair sitting directly in the center of the octagonal rug in the kitchen. Each time I moved the chair back, thinking I would ask her about it later, but I always forgot. One Friday evening, we were sitting and talking when she suddenly asked why I kept leaving the chair in the middle of the rug. I thought she was joking, but she was serious, and she said she had been meaning to ask me the same thing. We were unsettled but brushed it off. A week later, the truly scary stuff started. It was a weeknight, and we were each asleep in our beds. I heard the door slam so hard it shook the apartment. We always locked the door, so I assumed it was her. I got up and she called for me from her room. I went in and found her shaking and crying. She said a man was in our apartment. She woke up to him standing in her doorway with his back to her, looking into the kitchen. She heard him walk toward my room. She crawled to the end of her bed and watched him stand staring into my room while I slept. She said he suddenly turned and went out the door, slamming it twice. I am a heavy sleeper, so I only woke to the second slam. We called the boys next door to ask if they had somehow gotten in and were messing with us. Maybe one of us left the door unlocked, even though she insisted she had locked it. We were desperate for any explanation. We did not call the police because we hoped it was just a prank. A few weeks passed with nothing strange. My friend asked me to drive her to meet her boyfriend in the next town on a Friday after classes. They were going to the beach for the weekend. We left the apartment at around 4. I returned at about 5:30. I unlocked the door and sat on the couch to watch television. After a few minutes, I noticed the end table items were switched. One had a lamp and the other had a brass figurine, and now they were reversed. She was very tidy, so I thought she might have dusted before we left. I felt uneasy and walked to the kitchen where the chair was again in the middle of the rug. I went to my room and the pillows were at the foot of my bed. My bathroom was completely rearranged. Towels were shoved into the washcloth cubby, and washcloths were neatly folded where towels should be. Everything under the sink was now arranged all around the sink. I went to the kitchen and opened cabinet doors. Everything had been rearranged. I could feel my heart pounding. I went to her room and it was the same. Her bathroom was even worse. Everything had been removed from its place and thrown into the bathtub. 2 towels were neatly folded and shoved onto a small shelf. It looked like whoever did it ran out of time. Then it hit me. He is still in here. I did not run. I slowly scanned the room and walked back toward the couch where my keys were. It was still daylight and I could hear the boys next door. I grabbed my keys and ran out the door and straight into their apartment. I called the police, my roommate, my parents, and a friend to find a place to stay. The police came but were not helpful. Our parents met with the owners. They would not let us break the lease but agreed to let my dad change the locks and add a deadbolt if we returned the keys when the lease ended. We never had any other incidents and we never found out who was in our apartment. Story 28. All right, because many of my family members and friends know my Reddit username, I am using a throwaway because of the sheer terror of the story, and I would really not like for anyone to be identified. Not my story. This is my brother's. This happened about 15 years ago when my youngest brother was in maybe 3rd grade. He had a friend he spent a lot of time with at school. They were both really quiet kids, and they got along well. He used to spend a few hours at this kid's house after school, so the 3 of us siblings got to know the family pretty well. This kid invited my brother to spend the night on a Friday after school, so he got excited, packed his things, and went over. This is where things get very strange. I was not there to witness what happened, but my brother's extremely honest and I believe every word. He got to the house, played for a few hours, ate dinner, watched a movie. Just normal kid things. As they were winding down, the kid looked at my brother and said, "You are not staying in my room tonight." My brother was confused and asked why. The kid said, "You are not safe in my room. There is a man with a big smile covered in black who sits in the corner watching me. He is there every night. As long as I leave the door cracked open, he leaves me alone." My brother got freaked out but tried to laugh it off. The kid got serious and said he wants to harm me. My brother went pale, Before he could respond, the kid's mother told them to get into bed because they had plans early in the morning. My brother stayed in the guest room across the hall. Around 2 or 3 in the morning, my brother woke up to use the bathroom and out of habit closed the boy's door. Less than 30 seconds later, after he got back into bed, a blood-curdling scream jolted him awake. He ran to the kid's room, flung the door open, and turned on the light. The bottom of the kid's foot had been sliced from the tips of his toes to the bottom of his heel. There was a clean slab of skin hanging from his heel off the bed. The cleanest cut my brother said he had ever seen. The parents ran in, called our mom to say they were dropping off my brother, packed his things, and left immediately. After they dropped off my brother at around 3 in the morning, that was the last we heard from the family. The kid moved shortly after and never came back to school. We have no idea what happened, and my brother gets sick thinking about it. Story 29. Early October 2010, myself and a group of friends were staying in a beach house on the coast of North Carolina. It was around 11 at night, and we were all sitting on the back balcony overlooking the ocean, when towards the north, 2 orange lights came up over the horizon. We believed it was a boat far out at sea, but after a few minutes you could tell it was in the sky and not on the water. We thought maybe they were something astronomical or possibly planes coming right towards us. But after about 30 minutes they had not moved. All at once, one of them glowed much brighter for about 5 seconds and then went black. Minutes later, something flew by about 100 yards offshore and about 50 feet above the water. It looked like a pixelated mist and would probably have been impossible to see if not for the clear conditions that night. The best way to describe it is that it had the same pixelated effect as the creature from the movie Predator, but in an elongated cigar shape. Over the next 2 hours, the same thing happened 3 more times. The orange light would glow, and within a minute, the same type of object would pass. After the second time, I was ready and had my video camera in my lap. But when I tested it, I could not record anything because it was so dark. We waited for it the third time, and when the distant orange light brightened, we stood up and pressed against the balcony railing. Minutes later, the same object flew by, but this time something told me to look into the sky towards the front of the house. I stretched my neck around the side of the house from the balcony, and gliding above, with no lights or markings, was a metallic chevron-shaped craft moving silently. It looked like a large military drone, but made no noise at all. I lost track of it after it moved in front of the house, and after that, the orange lights went black and nothing else happened. Thinking back, it was strange, but none of us were creeped out at all, and even when I saw the thing above the house, it did not scare me. I have no idea what we saw that night, but it was definitely out of the ordinary. Story 30. When I was 6, we were between selling our old house and finishing our new one, so for about a year we lived in an apartment. My brother, my parents, and I lived there. After the first month, I started hearing things. It took me a while to understand what it was. Every breath I took, or any words whispered or spoken in my room, were repeated. I would say something like, "Greg, is that you?" and I would hear it whispered back. There were nights my brother slept at my grandmother's, but the whispering and breathing continued. At first, I hit my head against the pillow trying to block it out. After a while, I got used to it. It never actually spoke to me. It only echoed everything. One night I was sleeping, and I vividly recall waking up, though it might have been a very lucid dream, to a man's head floating in a bright sphere. Fog under the neck, not like a decapitated head. He told me his name was Roger. He said he knew we would be moving soon and wanted me to know he would always watch over me. When the new house was done, we moved in, and I never heard anything repeated again. My family said it was my imagination, until about 20 years later. I was working with my brother for a local pool company. One day we had a job at the complex we lived in as kids. While working on the pumps, we saw the tenants in our old place outside talking. We went to speak to them about how we used to live there. My brother joked about me always saying something weird was in that apartment. The woman turned to him and said her son says the same thing. He says someone repeats what he says. She said she never hears anything. She called him outside. He was maybe 5 or 6. He told me what he hears in his room. I talked to them for about 15 minutes and had to go. To this day, I cannot explain it. Story 31. So I have 4 stories. The first involves the Van Sant Bridge in New Hope, Pennsylvania. Historically, it is a covered bridge used to hang horse thieves and possibly some members of the Doan Gang. Legend says a woman in the late 1700s who became pregnant out of wedlock hanged herself from the bridge. People say if you park on the bridge and turn off the engine and lights, you see strange things. The first time we went, it was me and two girls. I had the T-tops off my Camaro. To scare them, I said I killed your baby. As soon as I said it, something hit the side of the bridge like a massive linebacker. I started the car and sped off. The girl in the passenger seat said she saw feet hanging from the rafters. As we were driving away, I saw handprints on the windshield the size of a small child, even though I keep my car spotless. We went back a few times and had other experiences, but that was the most intense. The second story was at a high-end restaurant in the same area. This part of Pennsylvania is near New Jersey and has a lot of Revolutionary War history. I was wearing a shirt with Ben Franklin on it. My dad and I love ghost shows, so he asked the waitress if she had any ghost experiences. She said the restaurant was definitely haunted. She said that one night while closing, she felt like she was walking through cobwebs in a spotless dining room. After dinner, I explored the building and went upstairs. At the top was a mirror that started vibrating strangely, and when I turned around, I saw a life-size bust of Ben Franklin. It was odd. The third story happened when I woke abruptly around 3 in the morning on Christmas Eve hearing traditional Irish music upstairs. I lived in the basement at the time. When we woke up, my dad's phone had a missed call from a restricted number at the same time I heard the music. The music was not his ringtone. My traditional Irish grandmother died of pancreatic cancer at around that same time. Nobody else heard the music, but I think it was her saying goodbye since I loved her very much. The last story is funny. My friends and I were drinking in my garage with the doors open, listening to music. We all needed to pee, so we went to the woodline. We heard an angry hiss and what sounded like heavy stomping about 10 yards into the woods. We thought it was a Sasquatch and ran. The next night, I went to check with my SIG and a flashlight. I heard the noise again, turned on the light and aimed, and found out it was a very angry doe bedding in the area. I fell down laughing and called my buddies to let them know it was not a mythical creature. Story 32, I was dating a girl from the end of my senior year of high school through the first half of my first semester of college. She lived in a small town in South Carolina, so driving to her place took roughly 45 minutes through nothing but woods. We were at my house and I drove her back home. By the time we arrived, it was around 9:30 or 10 at night, so it was already very dark. I did not need to be home until midnight since it was the weekend. So when we got to her house, which was a small one-story place on roughly 10 square miles of property with a few other houses, each at least a quarter mile apart, we had some time. We took my car down a back dirt trail into a clearing in the woods about 200 yards wide and maybe 50 yards deep with tall grass in the center and trees on all sides. We had been there before, so it was not unusual. We parked on one side of the clearing, turned off the engine, and lights put on some music and started fooling around. After about 20 minutes, she suddenly asked if I heard something and went silent. I said no, thinking it might have been someone driving on the main road 100 yards away, or maybe an animal. I waited in silence about 15 seconds before she shrugged it off. We tried to get back into things when suddenly we heard a low noise and froze. It was a deep, low-pitched hum, constant and barely audible, but steady for about 30 seconds before stopping. It unsettled us, but there was no clear reason to think it was anything unusual. I guessed it might be a large vehicle on the highway a mile away, but it was too quiet to determine the source. After a few minutes, we heard it again, this time much louder, definitely coming from within a quarter mile. I put on shoes and stepped outside to look while she watched from the car. I did not want to go far from her, so I walked about 20 feet in each direction, but saw nothing, though the noise was gradually getting louder. I got back into the car and told her I could not see anything, but we were too uncertain to continue fooling around. Then we heard voices and crunching leaves deep in the woods. We sighed with relief, thinking it was kids or hunters. But about a minute later, the noise returned, almost deafening this time, and at a slightly higher pitch. We could no longer hear any voices. Then a bright light appeared in the woods a few hundred yards away, and as the pitch increased, the light began moving parallel to the clearing. It looked like some type of vehicle, but we were too far to see anything except the light, which sped across the ground, then began lifting into the air. It rose above the treetops and flew into the distance until we could neither see nor hear it. At that point, I drove her back home, dropped her off, and went straight back. We never discussed it again. To this day, I still believe we saw something not from this world.